Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on incorporating mobile apps into your political strategy. Thank you all for joining us. We have a lot to cover today, so we are going to dive right in. So a few quick logistical housekeeping notes before we get started. Please note that this is going to be only 30 minutes, so we have a lot of ground to cover and not that much time. If you have any questions, please wait until the end of the webinar to ask them. And of course, after the webinar, we will be sure to send over both a recording of today's session in addition to a copy of the slides that we'll be going over. And just as a quick highlight, the purpose of today's webinar is to highlight and discuss why political advertisers should utilize in-app advertising and what political audiences look like on mobile. What we'll discuss today, so at the beginning, give you a quick overview of the wonderful speakers joining me today and where the data that we'll be presenting is coming from. We'll then dive into why political advertisers should be thinking about and looking into in-app advertising. From there, we will discuss some of our audiences. We'll then dive into the wider landscape, looking specifically at what's happening on social media. We'll then go into what we've been learning already from the beginning of this year and before as it relates to political advertising. And at the end, we will discuss what you need to do between now and Tuesday, November 3rd, Election Day. And as I mentioned before, if we have time, we will answer questions at the end. So I am Matt Kaplan. I am the Content Marketing Manager here at InMobi. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Greg Archibald and Jeremy Huber. Greg, Jeremy, can you give the folks tuning in a brief overview of your role here at InMobi?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today. I'm Greg Archibald. I head up North American Media for InMobi. We're super excited to spend the next 30 minutes sharing some of our insights on political advertising and how the in-app ecosystem helps political advertisers to more effectively reach and drive their objectives.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Huber, Head of Audience Intelligence North America for InMobi. I oversee the consumer insights, the market research, and audience teams here serving US North America. So we'll talk more about the data that we leverage for audience activation through our media team.
And speaking of the data, Jeremy, so there's a number of data points that we'll be discussing. Before we dive into that, where is our data coming from?
Sure, Matt. So, at InMobi, we combine both first-party, third-party, and first-party stated data to provide a complete view of the mobile consumer. And you'll see, again, how that informs some of the insights and the audiences that we'll be sharing with you today. But we'll spend a little bit of time sharing what those sources are. On the left side of your screen, you'll see that we have some owned and operated apps here at InMobi, and we have an adoption rate of about 10 million monthly active users engaged in those apps, for which we get many signals, including app install and uninstall behavior across device. We have some demographic information on those users and also get very robust location signals. In addition to that, we leverage our app SDK partnerships to view additional insights on about 270 million monthly active users here in the US, also location, behavioral, and demographic data. We also pair that with our residential graph data. We have about 150 million or so unique users living in 100 million US households. We are able to look at them from not just where they live, what type of residence, demographics they're in, but also some of their physical visit behavior when they're away from home. So all that on the left side is observed behavior. On the right side of the screen, you'll see stated behavior. Those same 270 million US and over 2 billion global users that we have access to, we can leverage for direct consumer market research. So we use that market research to understand the why behind why they're doing what they're doing. And again, all very important to leverage these different data sources and views to inform all audiences, including the political audiences we'll be discussing later.
Great. So let's dive right in. Greg, why should political advertisers be thinking about and considering in-app advertising?
Yeah, this election cycle, eMarketer is predicting that nearly $7 billion will be spent on political advertising, with close to 20% of that being spent in digital. And so for the first time, digital political ad spend is going to surpass 1 billion mark, expected to land at 1.3. And that money is being spent for two primary objectives. One, to mobilize the people you expect to vote for you, and the other to persuade that small portion of swing voters who are undecided. So when you think about digital, and when you think about that in the context of political campaigns, it is all about the effectiveness with minimal waste, reaching small niche groups in a set time frame within budget, and digital is uniquely positioned for that. So where does mobile play into this? You know, today's consumers / voters are spending more time in mobile devices than they spend watching TV. And of that time spent on mobile devices, 88% of that is spent in-app, with half of that being spent outside of the walled gardens. The other thing to take into account is video is a major influencer in ad format for political advertising. And the majority of time is spent viewing videos is via connected devices or in-app. So while Facebook and Google are still expected to soak up about 3/4 of the spend, those companies that can enable the effective scale, reach, and bring the appropriate data capabilities are uniquely positioned to do that. And in-app marketplace is a great place to play in that field. So, hey, Matt, I'll just continue on this. You know, I talked a little bit about scale and reach and the importance of that. You know, the other component that really comes in is the ability to target and reach niche audiences, or what's called micro-target voters. Spray and pray is not in the political vernacular, so this capability becomes a key component for a successful political campaign. For statewide and larger budget elections, most campaigns will partner with data modeling firms to provide custom voter scored audiences. And we've seen the ability to effectively onboard those audiences and activate them at scale makes all the difference for those campaigns. For the down ballot campaigns, or those that don't have bigger budgets, the ability for partners like InMobi to have data that they can choose off the shelf, like L2 or Data Trust, is really important to be able to reach. And then what I would bring up, and Jeremy, I think you're going to talk to this more, it's also being able to bring your own data capabilities. I think demographic, behavioral, location is a key component. So those three things combined make a big difference in being able to reach the audience that these campaigns are trying to get at.
Yeah, to further expand on Greg's point, right? Because of those data sources that we referenced earlier, we're able to look at audience segmentation at many different angles. You know, because we know location, we can do it based off of specific states or metros, the demographic angle Greg mentioned, and then of course behavior, right? Because we know what actions they're taking physically and digitally, we can use those to inform some specific audiences, whether you're looking to promote fundraising or just get out the vote, or looking to drive voting for a particular party or candidate. All of those different audiences are very nuanced, and you know, that's where, again, to Greg's point, we leverage all of our unique data sources to create segments and subsegments for immediate activation.
So I referenced earlier the importance of video as an ad format, and in particular how that's being leveraged in the app today. And so when you think about video as an ad format and in-app capabilities, there are a couple key KPIs that, and this falls across digital, but definitely in-app. There are a couple KPIs that political campaigns are looking to achieve to validate that digital spend. The first and foremost is video viewability and complete rates, and it's inherently measurable in-app, and in-app scores higher on viewability than desktop and mobile web, making it a great capability or a great place to be able to advertise. Inventory quality is also of equal importance. It needs to be served in a brand safe environment. in-app is because of how in-app is structured. It tends to be a much safer environment for political campaigns to advertise in. Other thing that they're looking at is ad fraud. Every dollar counts, and so any partner you work with needs to be able to protect against ad fraud and be able to recognize it when it happens, which most of the major players out there can do. And then the last, which I referenced earlier, is really around scale. You want to be able to do all those things, but able to do it at scale. And that's, this is where in-app, based on just utilization by consumers, can allow political campaigns to really achieve their objectives and do so at scale. So as we think, while presidential campaigns remain a big focus, there's a lot of activity amongst down ballot campaigns that are finding ways to leverage mobile and app to engage and influence voters. According to Zenith, of ad purchases, 70% of ad purchases will be made programmatically by the end of 2020. And so the idea here is it does come back to efficiency and scalability, and programmatic has grown in adoption. We've seen this, across the partners we work with. It's being able to leverage programmatic as a way to run scaled campaigns and do so in a very cost-efficient way it becomes extremely important, and that's why we've seen this grow as a capability. And just one example of that is we've seen that play out just in this election cycle alone. We've seen on our platform we've seen growth of 152% from July through August, and we're not even into the heavy season. And then Jeremy, do you want to talk about this, because this comes from our research?
Yeah, sure. So, and we're going to have a couple of stats coming from this, and so I just want to share with the group here what we're pulling from. I mentioned, when we talked about our data, we have pulse market research and reach, nearly everybody that has a mobile device here in the U.S. And so we just wrapped. You can see from the source note below, August 20th through September 4th, just wrapped a pretty extensive market research project, and some of the initial findings are trickling through from our team. So, again, 4,200 respondents during that time frame. It's important to note that when we talk about benefits of in-app advertising, and Greg covered a lot of those points well, just to confirm that it is a great source for political advertising. You can see the stat here. When we were asking these users how they best consume information about candidates, 44% of those users stated that mobile phone and app advertising helps them learn about the candidates. The only outperforming channel was TV. So again, we'll have some more stats coming from this, but pretty healthy stat there from people stating empirically that they use their phone and apps in specific to learn about candidates.
And Jeremy, I also know that we wanted to take a look at swing states and to see what app behavior looked like there. So what did our data find?
Yeah, so and on this one, so we're kind of shifting gears a little bit with this slide, those joining us. So I just mentioned that we're doing that market research, and that was your first stat. So here's where we leveraged, and then in the next few slides, you'll see this play out. We took all that observed data, right? So which apps they have on device, how much time they're spending with an app, or which websites they're visiting. What we did is we did a pretty big deep dive on a large segment of users, and we looked for commonalities of those users and their engagement with specific types of behaviors. Some of those included whether they had specific news apps and how much time they spent with them. So as you probably can imagine, those that over-indexed with CNN versus Fox News, and really those that spent considerably more time in one or not the other, scored a certain way within this project. Those that over-index on NPR scored a certain way. A couple other things that we found were commonalities between some of these states and metros is if they had a higher affinity with a number of religious or Bible-related apps or websites on their device, and also if they were racing fans. That seemed there was a pretty commonality between states and cities when there was a high engagement with NASCAR. So the net of it is we took a lot of that data and looked to see how much people were engaging and applied those learnings and philosophies to a list of states and also some metros within some states. And the outcome of that, as you can see here, is from our analysis, we found that Arizona, was not just a swing state. Arizona is leaning blue. The state of Arizona and the users that we observed from a mobile perspective tend to exhibit more blue type behaviors, as I mentioned before. Florida, we found, is a solid swing. It was evenly split. There seems to be, and we'll get into this momentarily, but really two Floridas. Michigan, we also found solid swing. Pennsylvania, the result of that was leaning blue, and Wisconsin was a swing state as well. And then, again, looking at the metro. So it's not just enough for us because, we recognize that down ballot in specific races, our partners may want to focus on specific audiences within metros or, maybe across the country of those that are exhibiting specific behaviors. And so we wanted to look at certain metros by state. And so California was one, although California is one of the, if not the bluest state that we observed. We did notice some nuances. In Anaheim, it was more of a swing. We found that those that live in Anaheim exhibited more swing type behavior leaning blue, whereas San Francisco was a very solid blue metro. Colorado, I want to spend a little bit of time on Colorado because they're really similar to Florida. There are two Colorados within the metros that we observed. Colorado Springs, a solid red metro. I mean, it was one of the most red leaning user groups that we've seen in this exercise. And Denver was on the opposite side of that with being blue. Texas, we're seeing a little bit more blue coming out of Austin and Arlington, more specifically in Austin. I think we have a couple more. So Arizona, again, Arizona, we found more of a leaning blue state. Mesa was more blue, Flagstaff more red. In Florida, and I mentioned this a moment ago, really kind of two Floridas. Absolutely Jacksonville being red and Miami being blue, but it wasn't just leaning red or leaning blue. Jacksonville Metro was solid red and Miami was solid blue, so quite a contrast there. And similarly in Virginia, we found Alexandria and Virginia Beach were on opposite ends of the spectrum with their users. So again, building from some of that market research that we shared earlier, again, this probably confirms what we're seeing in a lot of other surveys with maybe a little more nuanced actionable insights that we are privy to here at InMobi. We did find that of those 4,200 users, 82% do intend to vote in the 2020 presidential election, so that's a healthy number. And then there are some splits here based off of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. Among those that intend to vote, only 52% expect to vote in person. So again, obviously, given COVID and the current pandemic, and then entering flu season with the pandemic, and many states now that offer just vote by mail as a standard practice or as an absentee ballot option, a large number of people are stating they intend to vote by mail. Now that is heavier leaning towards the Democrat side versus the Republican side, and independents are somewhere in the middle. And then, interestingly enough, most of these users, at least as it relates to the presidential election, have said that they've already made up their minds, and they did it several months ago. But that's why, again, it's so critical to get in front of these people, not just on election day, but between now and then, right? Because you have a lot of these people that have decided, and many that are undecided, but they also intend to vote, many of them by mail, prior to the election itself. So a lot of people that decided top level, but then on down ballot, a lot of those decisions are made in the days and weeks coming up to the election.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, one of the things that really stuck out to me in the research was that while many people have made up their minds regarding the presidential campaign, people are a little bit less sure when it comes to the down ballot campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how voters are deciding there, depending on where they live for some of the non-presidential campaigns this year.
Yeah, and Matt, what we keep finding is that a lot of that's about education, right? I mean, obviously the money that's being spent in the education about those candidates is happening at the highest levels now, and it will start to transition a little more towards the down ballot stuff, you know, as we get closer to the election.
And speaking of education, a lot of that is happening on social media. So Greg, what does the social media landscape look like for political advertisers?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year to say the least. I mean, social remains a highly effective way to reach and engage voters. So it's no surprise that dollars have flowed that way. But there's also no surprise that a lot of scrutiny has come from that as well. And so if you look at a number of the big social media companies have just totally opted out: Twitter, Spotify, LinkedIn, TikTok, or they put rules around it. Snapchat said they're going to fact check. We referenced this earlier, is late last year, Google said they were going to limit they were going to actually do away with micro-targeting and only allow targeting based on age, gender, and location as defined by postal code address. And so the big one out there that's going to get the vast majority of the money, almost 60% of the dollars, are going to flow to Facebook. And so Facebook has been under quite a bit of pressure about that. They have made some moves. Late last year, they allowed people to opt out of seeing political ads. As of last Thursday, they announced that they wouldn't be accepting any new political ads up to a week before the U.S. elections. While that's interesting, I know they've taken a ton of heat because it only applies to new, and by that point, I think a lot of people will have already voted, as we referenced earlier. So I don't think it's going to limit the dollars getting spent with them, but that scrutiny will continue to follow them. But social clearly remains a viable channel. I do think that it's causing campaigns to really rethink being heavily invested in social and start looking at other capabilities similar to what InMobi brings to the table.
And Greg, as far as what InMobi brings to the table, what have we seen from both earlier this year and previous elections?
Sure, Matt. And I'll try to move through this quickly because I know we want to be able to open this up for questions. But there are probably 4 things I would call out that we've learned over time, many of which I touched on earlier. Scale and data remain key. There are set budgets, set timelines to run those in, and the ability to effectively reach a very niche audience becomes critical. And so to do that, you need the scale, you need the data capabilities to effectively run those campaigns to achieve the KPIs that the advertisers are looking for. Viewability, brand safety are critical as well. That is, the worst way for a campaign to get called out is, if it's run in a not brand safe environment, or if they're spending money and those ads aren't viewable. So making sure that whoever you work with, they can appropriately cover off on those and guarantee the capabilities. Video and CTV. Video has been big. CTV has grown drastically over this last year. So the ability to be able to leverage CTV as a channel to reach those users has become all the more important as that platform and solution has grown. And then the growing adoption of programmatic. I think that, like the industry, so much has moved to running advertising via programmatic platforms. The political ad campaigns have also moved in that direction. And so you'll want to work with partners that have proven programmatic capabilities.
And so, Jeremy, I know there's really less than 3 months between now and Tuesday, November 3rd, Election Day. So what do political advertisers need to do between now and then to really get the most of the remaining time?
Yeah, Matt, I think that's kind of the big question, right? From our perspective, I'd say understand, and most of them have done this already, but really understand which audiences or audience segments align with your goals and objectives, right? Again, we talked about it earlier, whether you're trying to educate them on a candidate or just get out the vote, potentially do fundraising. Those are going to resonate, those specific messages are going to resonate more with specific audience segments. And so just truly understanding who they are and then using a partner like an InMobi to target them. Some examples, because we've been doing this, to Greg's point, for quite some time and preparing, we have preset audiences that we built that leverages all that data that we talked about, right? So all the work that we do from the data and the insights perspective is only valuable when we can bring actionable audiences from a media activation perspective. So a couple examples that we have available, like healthcare professionals, right? That's potentially a targetable segment that someone on this call may be interested in. We of course, because we know location and we know education and a lot of other things, we have millions of those that have been identified as healthcare professionals, and then that can also even be segmented down: male, female, married, unmarried, things like that. Other things that our partners have come to us on, of course, the obvious, left, right, and moderate, based off actions and behaviors that we observe. And I gave some examples of those with the states and the major metros. We create audiences of these users that can be targeted nationally or on a more specific level. We also have identified, blue collar workers, those that are specific, maybe compassionate people, right? They focus on certain religions, or they have pets, or they have other observed behaviors that put them into that kind of those buckets as hand raisers. So again, I would say, long story short, looking and partnering with somebody like an InMobi who can understand the audiences you're trying to reach, activate existing audiences, or even do custom audience creation for you that can be activated upon rather quickly and then sustained with different messaging.
And Greg, between now and Election Day, what do you see as the biggest things that political advertisers need to do to get ready?
Yeah, what I would say, and we hit on a lot of the key points, is there is a lot of money flowing into this election cycle. For many folks on the presidential side, decisions have been made, but the down ballot, there's a lot of education that is still taking place, and so political advertisers need to look at different formats and in marketplaces that they play in. They should actively consider in-app based on its capabilities to really hit on those KPIs of viewability, scale, brand safe environment, and most importantly, it's where people are spending time. And with everything that's going on in the world, what we would stress is just make sure that that you're appropriately reaching those users, we're getting out the vote, and that we get people to take the action that we're looking for them to take.
Great. Fantastic. So we have about 2 minutes for questions. So everyone, if you're tuning in, if you have any questions, you can send them along now. So I know one question that we've received is in regard to CTV. So what role is connected TV and OTT channels likely going to play for the remainder of this election cycle?
Yeah, and so we touched on this, but if we think about a format that allows you to influence users, obviously television still gets the vast majority of political ad dollars. CTV is grown in importance in the sense that more people are cord cuttings and are accessing content outside of linear TV, and so CTV's ability to track and better target users makes it a very, very important platform to be able for political advertisers to be able to take advantage of. And we've seen that here at InMobi as dollars have shifted this year. We've seen more going through our CTV channel. So the two major formats that we're running today are video and CTV.
Interesting. So I think we have time for one more question. We'll try to be very quick. So what do InMobi political audiences look like, and how do they differ potentially from the audiences that we use for other types of advertisers?
Matt, so yeah, I can take that. I think the the difference, of course, is in our data sources, and not just the depth, but the scale in our data sources, which allow us to, again, not just look at assumed actions and behaviors, but truly observed behaviors. So again, another example of that could be maybe people that are interested in climate change. So again, those that engage with those types of topics, we observe a lot of that behavior. And again, we can then put them into a specific audience that could be activated for a litany of different reasons that are beneficial to political advertisers. So again, it's just a matter of not just do we know who they are demographically, we know where they are physically, so where they're physically going, and then we observe what actions they're taking on their mobile device. And so we combine all that together to really get not just depth, but scale of audiences for our partners.
Great. Well, everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you again for tuning in. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to send us a note. My email address is up here on the screen. And of course, please keep an eye out for your inbox for a copy of today's webinar recording and the slides we went through. Thank you all for attending.